Okay, this is going to be a little shorter than usual. Not that usual has had time to set in yet. Maybe shorter than I hoped for a week ago. So I kind of hurt my back, apparently. It took me about 10 minutes to get out of bed this morning. I'd say that makes me feel old, except that this happens probably yearly or so, on average, I'd say. Every year since I was 15 or 16 or something. You know, my body just is not built very well in certain ways. The recovery is iffy. And so that's why I write down sometimes life is pain, not only because of Princess Bride, which is apparently where the quote is from, although I forgot that for a while, because life is filled with pain. Eventually, no matter what, you're going to regret what you did, and sometimes you won't even know why you regret it. You just feel bad, and it'll be stuck in your subconscious, this memory or this event, which won't leave you until you figure it out and fix it. You know, what went wrong? How do I do better next time? Because you can't go back. You have to keep moving forward. I say have to because that's what happens when you're alive, right? You can't just stop and not change. You are change. We are change, movement, and existence. That's how we know time passes, right? Things change. We're not timeless. We're not eternal either. Anyway, I didn't read much. I mostly laid down on the floor, actually, and watched the TV, listened to a few lectures. But I did manage to write down a bit of a poem, like I do every single day. So I'm going to read that and then explain it, and that's going to be what I talk about today, right? I got up and I spoke about something, no matter what. So what I've recently been doing is basing these poems, which are also philosophies, on quotes from books. So this quote is from the book Bainwrecker by Jacqueline Carey. The story of the book is basically there's an evil god who is not actually evil, and the story comes out over time that it was the other gods who abandoned him and hurt him and so on. Meanwhile, the other gods are claiming they're good, and they have people in the magical land where this takes place following their directions and their prophecies, and the bad guy also has people following his directions and his ideas. You can guess how that turns out. But it is a novel where you question good and evil. You question what's below or what's behind, perhaps, the story you hear. All right, so the quote is, "And they did not seem, after all, so evil. They believed in the rightness of what they did, in the quest to render the sundered world whole." Bainwrecker, chapter 19, and following. Are there evil people, or only people who do evil? The question is important because I might be one. Revealed by the light of the sun, acknowledged by a beautiful mind, it is possible that I would find out who I am. Already aware this is not a happy thing, I stretch my hand out to grab a cause, and I hit the bell with a hammer following the old laws. Blood and death is what I write about, but they are poetry in my eyes, not something which we should despise or avoid, for they are inside us and around us, part of us, chasing us behind, waiting for us in front, the water falling after springing forth from the fountain which is life, or, by another name, the embrace of strife. Is this not evil? The illusion of want and happiness, the lie of an invisible reward, Damocles' sword which folk call by the name of justice? Existence neither forgives nor forgets, although it does move onward past death and time, beyond regrets and rhyme. By our very nature, we are changed, moment to moment and year to year, yet some part of us seems to always remain the same. And it often seems to us that secret peace bears all the blame of unhappiness and angst, anger, or depression, an unending line of therapy sessions. If I could pull my unconsciousness out from the realm of mist, and was thus able to list it in a database to figure out how it works, would I then be able to fix it in me? Or shall we necessarily experience and understand the case that to look on our own soul is to change that soul? Self-reflection, after all, has long been the belle of the ball, the crown princess, the honored prince, the old sage, the holy words on the holy page. I have heard a quote, I know not its origin, which claims that no person believes themselves to be evil. Towards the concept of the validity of that claim, I do not feel positive, although I will not go so far as to call the claim untrue. Does that make me a coward? That I cannot stand up and say what I believe in a forthright manner? I stammer and equivocate on all my claims, for I cling tightly to the Frenchman's doubts, Hume's whispers, Basho's shout, and the Athenian's honoured clout. I know nothing. Neither do you. But we are not nothing. We do not do nothing. We are something. And our actions, whether good or evil, reflect our choices, even if these incarnated ideas are covered up by mud and muddied by physical presence, their ethereal voice. Here, the limitations of noise, chaos battering against the walls of law, potential unable to match the power of actuality. That, after all, is morality. What do we do when we are not all-powerful or all-imaginary? Spirits mixed together, monads upon monads building arms and legs, we help people, we do harm, and often know not which is which. The future sometimes makes good and evil appear to switch. I might feel that I do right today, but then tomorrow that feeling goes away. How do I make it stay? A firm foundation, an acceptance of the risk, the admittance of my fault, the pledge to be better next time, reflecting on my mistakes and making them rhyme. Is this action evil? It feels right. What will I call it when I look back on this night? Will the story be dark or bright? And so, to explain that, although explaining does seem to take away some of the feeling, I would say that it is inspired by the idea that we can do all the background work, we can do all the preparation, we can work with all the logic and the ideas we have to figure out what is right and wrong and good and bad, and we can believe that. We can act on it. But what will happen, what always happens, is not all of those actions are correct, not all those actions are on a firm foundation, not all those actions contain all information. We take risks that we will be wrong, and we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the fact that sometimes we do bad things, or we hurt people without wanting to hurt them, or without even realizing it. It just comes out later. Sometimes it's ourselves we hurt too. I think we're doing good, but it's somebody else's good and not our good. Or it can be the other way around. It can be our good and bad for someone else, but we pretend that we're the center of the world, and so our goodness is important. This might even be unconscious. It might be subconscious that we act in such a way as to put ourselves first in front of others, or put others first in front of us. How do we balance that? How do we figure out what to do? We can't before we act. We can reduce the odds, we can work on the risk, we can figure it out, but sometimes we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes the information is going to change. Sometimes the results are going to be different than what we thought they were going to be. So the question of beyond good and evil, if you will, is not the idea for me that good and evil don't happen, that harm and help don't happen, that it's all nothing, but rather all our actions of good and bad contain an unknown, contain maybe the antithesis, the possibility of an antithesis, perhaps. The possibility that our will is negated because our will was for something to happen as a result of our action, and that thing did not happen. But is our will negated, or is our will just more complex? It might be an unconscious desire of ours that we act upon, or an unconscious ordering of logic, perhaps. But what we can do in response to this is self-reflect. That's the bell of the ball, as I put it, right? That's the focus, that's the center, that's the amazing piece that humans are able to do, is we can remember what happened and say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. Or why did I act like that? Let me try and figure it out. Or I thought that was good, but it was actually bad. Or I thought that was bad, but it was actually good. Why do I feel guilt? Why do I feel praise? And all these complexities of life and existence, which happen to us when we look backwards, when we reflect upon what happened. So the question is, what do we do looking forwards? Looking forwards, I think it simplifies in many ways. We reflect backwards, we decide what we liked or didn't like, and then we go forward and we say, I don't want to do that again, or I do want to do better next time. So sometimes, in stories like this one, in stories like Banewrecker, good and evil are two sides of an idea. And the way the story is presented, one of those sides is very wrong. It's not the evil god in this one, right? Or perhaps we might call him the rebellious god. Or the others might be the rebellious god because they're going against the rule of nature. There's complexities in this book, I suppose. But I've talked long enough. Let it be ended like that. Let it continue. What story am I going to tell? It will at least contain my speech today, my rhymes, and what I managed to say.